Alright, so this video is something new. This is gonna be a lengthy video, but I just feel like this needs to be said because I was very annoyed by by a video that was posted up on YouTube about the Philippine Spanish language. And this got me thinking about a lot of things. It got me thinking about so many things about the Philippine Spanish dialect. And a lot of it stems from the annoyance of me, like me being annoyed from a lot of Filipinos. And you have to understand that most Filipinos are just not educated. They're not educated and they're very ignorant. And this came from that ignorant video, which is about the Philippine Spanish language. So to clear things up, I'm going to post this video as a response and educate the world about the Philippine Spanish dialect. Um, so again, this is going to be a lengthy video, and this is just something I don't really do out of the ordinary. This is just kind of like a little thing I just really want to put out. Um, so yeah, screw it. I'm just gonna go with it. All right. So el español filipino, the Philippine Spanish dialect, right? So Spanish background is, or the background first of all, is that Spanish was spoken in the Philippines, or I shouldn't say the Philippines, but in the archipelago at around 1521, right? That's when Magellan's crew first landed in the island of Mactan in the area of Cebu, right? And that's when the first Europeans came to the islands, and that's when Spanish was first heard on the islands. Um, and during colonial times, and I'm talking about only the Spanish colonial times, not American colonial times, but during the Hispanic colonial times, Spanish became an official language in the archipelago, and the archipelago was later known as Las Islas Filipinas, or the Philippine Islands. Um, and because of that, so much Spanish influence came into many of the Philippine local languages, and even created a new fusion language, a Creole language called Chabacano. And as we know, Chabacano has different dialects, but this video is not going to be about Chabacano, it's going to be about Spanish. So this video is Spanish. We're going to I guess specifically focus on the Philippine dialect of Spanish. Now, that's just the background of this language, right? Currently, Spanish is still spoken in the Philippines, right? We still have Filipinos who still speak Spanish as a native language, meaning that these Filipinos are born in the Philippines, they speak Spanish as a first language, and they learn Spanish as a first language. They don't speak any other indigenous Philippine languages as a first language besides Spanish. Most of these people, though, who speak Spanish as a native language are clustered in major cities like Manila, or even clusters in outside major cities where there are big haciendas or communities where these Spanish-speaking people live. Mostly, these people are big business owners or landowners, like the sugar plantations. Um, Moving on to the status and the prospects. So, the current status of the language according to the current constitution, the 1987 constitution, during the Corazon Aquino presidency, is that Spanish was removed as an official language and is currently under the constitution, or under the current constitution, stated as a voluntary language, voluntary and optional language alongside with Arabic. And even though it has recognition in the constitution, it's still not an official language as a status. It's just recognized in the Constitution as an important language by means of being optional and voluntary, meaning entities within the Philippines can use the Spanish language, right? It's optional and voluntary, and it's stated in the Constitution as optional and voluntary. Now, there has been some growing movements to officialize the Spanish language in the Philippines, and that growing movement it's been starting since the late 2000s, and that's just growing even more momentum as we become more of a globalized nation, the Philippines that is, because of much more influence from Latin America and the European Union. Um, anyway, so the current prospects and the status of it during the 2000s, that decade of the 2000s, a former president, Gloria Aquino, signed a memorandum where to bring back Spanish into secondary education or high school education, right? Because before, Spanish was a required subject to be taught in schools and universities, and now they're bringing it back into the education system alongside with the help of the government of Spain and other entities such as the Instituto Cervantes and the Chilean government and so forth, right? So more and more people now are starting to learn Spanish as a second language, as an elective. Actually, in Zamboanga alone, there are more Spanish teachers that teach in the public sector than there are um, anywhere else in the country, which is quite surprising to me, at least. I would have thought it was Manila, but Zamboanga has more Spanish teachers teaching Spanish there than any other place. And this is according to the special programs, the SPFL, the Special Pilot Program or Special Programs on the Foreign Language, because the Department of Education, the DepEd, brings out statistics to undermine and show the process of, or the progress of all these foreign languages being taught in senior high schools and just in high schools in general, I guess. But yes, Spanish is the most popular, widely taught second language in schools in the Philippines. Next to, I think after that is like Mandarin, but I don't know. We're not talking about Mandarin. We're talking about Spanish. So Spanish, yeah, it's a very, very popular subject to learn in the Philippines, and that is evident of the statistics that are being brought up in the, or brought up in the, or brought about into the DepEd conferences, right? So it's got a really, really good future prospect, and most in the country, and most people would prefer Filipinos to be bilingual English and Spanish because of a lot of call centers, right? And a lot of healthcare workers that get exported would be a bonus to learn Spanish, especially those that go into the North American countries like Canada and the United States. Spanish becomes such a huge, huge advantage. Now, here in Australia, it's also nice to know Spanish too, because many Australians understand that Spanish is still spoken in the Philippines, unlike North American counterparts, which they didn't understand that. And that's why this video is geared towards those of you who are ignorant and didn't know that Spanish is still spoken to the Philippines, or Spanish is still spoken in the Philippines. Um, the next point I want to talk about here is about the Real Academia. All right, you know, there was coming there was going to be a point in time where the Spanish language would disappear from the Philippines. And because of that, during American colonization, or yeah, during colonization, or during the Commonwealth era of the Philippines, right, the Commonwealth era, English became much more of a widely and dominated language in media, in the news, in mediums of instructions, right? Even the Spanish higher classes were learning English and speaking English. And this was going to put a big blow into the Spanish language. There was competition of which language was more popular. And because of that day and age of globalization and colonization, of American colonization, English became more of a prestige language to learn. This put a lot of concern with the Spanish community, or Spanish speaking community in the Philippines. And according to one source, if I can get this correct, all right, the Tobal de Ayala family decided to invest to invest in building a Real Academia, or the Royal Academy, as it translates, the Real Academia in the 1920s, I believe, during the Premio Sobel time, to um, with the purpose of not wanting the Spanish language dying in the Philippines. And this is why today the Spanish language is still alive, thanks to the establishment of the Real Academia Filipina, or Real Academia de la Lengua. So, with the Real Academia established, Spanish is never going to die in the Philippines. And thanks to this wonderful family, the Tobel de Ayala, and their group, or related groups, they saved the Spanish language from dying in the Philippines, and therefore Spanish will never, I guess, be gone in the Philippines. It's so embedded in our culture, in our languages, that it's just to get rid of it is like colonial mentality. You're just getting rid of things that don't belong to you, which is something we shouldn't be doing as Filipinos. And that's the role today of the Real Academia, is to not only just to make sure that the language is alive and being spoken, but it also regulates how the Spanish language is spoken, the rules, the grammar. It governs the Spanish language, so to speak. It governs the spelling, the orthography, pronunciation, colloquialisms, everything like that. That's the job of the Real Academia. And it's not just the Philippines that has one of these, right? This Real Academia is a part of a consortium of other Real Academias around the world, especially in Spanish-speaking countries. Now, moving into the influence and why does it matter, and why I'm making this video. So we talked about the Spanish language as of today. I'm making this video because yes, Spanish is a very important language in the Philippines, and because I want to make sure that when people put videos out explaining the Spanish language of the Philippines, it's not being broadcasted and miseducated by others, right? Just because you're Filipino and you think you can pronounce Spanish doesn't mean you're correct. That's the key here. A lot of Filipinos think they can pronounce Spanish words by pronouncing them in English or an Anglo way, but they are dead wrong, okay? And this is why I think it matters to make such a video, to clarify this miseducation and to clarify all the correct truths about this. Moreover, in this kind of video, I'm going to also talk about the linguistics, just basic linguistics about the Spanish language in the Philippines, because I know there are also foreigners out there that are curious about Spanish spoken in the Philippines when Tagalog and other Philippine languages, and especially Chavacano, get most of the spotlight. This is a language that we should never forget as Filipinos. And before I end this video into the next one, I'm going to review the Spanish alphabet with you. This is, according to the Real Academia, this is the modern Spanish alphabet that the Philippine Spanish dialect follows in accordance with other Spanish dialects, right? So listen to the way I pronounce the words, right? And this is going to be the way they pronounce it in Philippine Spanish, because I'm going to go in depth in another video about the phonology and other linguistic aspects of this. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, Ñ, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. So again, this is a video, so you can pause, rewind, fast forward, all that kind of stuff, but just get a feel for how it's pronounced, because when we start talking more about characteristics of Philippine Spanish, you'll understand some things.